Sam Darnold keeps spinning the pigskin, day 2 of Seahawks training camp, and he can thank his receivers for making it look even better. Going to be diving into how the receivers continue to shine in the opening days of training camp here on our Thursday edition of Locked On Seahawks.
You are Locked On Seahawks, your daily Seattle Seahawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Greetings, 12. This is Corbin Smith, host of the Locked On Seahawks podcast, your daily Seahawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Glad to be joined, as always, by my co-host in crime, Rob Rang. And a special thanks to all the 12s who are listening in. Thank you, as always, for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. Whether you're down in Anaheim, California, or if you're across the country listening from Richmond, Virginia, we thank all of you for tuning in to Locked On Seahawks. Day 2 of Seahawks training camp officially in the books. We're going to be taking a look at some offensive position groups that shine today, including the tight end spot without Noah Fant, maybe a bit more clarity on where that position is heading, and a safety position that at this point, I don't know how Seattle's going to figure out what they're going to do there with the talent that they have at that position group. It's going to be a jam-packed episode. Let's get to it. Now for your lead story here on our Thursday edition of Locked On Seahawks. To begin training camp, not surprisingly, all eyes have been on the 3 new quarterbacks for the Seattle Seahawks, most notably the starting quarterback Sam Darnold coming over in free agency as a replacement for Geno Smith. And Rob, as we talked about yesterday, you and I on site for the practice, getting to watch Sam Darnold sling the pigskin. He was getting the ball out quickly. That continued today, but I want to go a step further talking about where Sam Darnold is at here. And I don't want to make it look like the receivers and the quarterbacks were together for like 3 full weeks. They had 2 days of practice down in Southern California. But you can see that extra couple days of work manifesting itself on the field to start training camp, particularly for the quarterback who, as he talked about after practice, he uses his feet kind of as a gauge for his timing. And if he's having to hitch multiple times, that changes where you're going with the football. And he just seems like he's much more comfortable getting the ball out quickly here these first couple of days. And a lot of that has to do with the chemistry that he's got with his receivers. There was one play in particular, Cooper Kupp on an out route. Kupp wasn't even going into his break yet, and Sam Darnold was getting ready to throw the ball. Julian Love tried to jump the route, and he was frustrated because the throw was perfectly timed, and even with his awareness, he was not able to get there to make a play on the football. There was another one to Kupp that was on a corner route that he wasn't coming out of his break yet, and the ball's already in the air. Lofts it over a linebacker, 20-plus yard gain on that play. That connection in particular today jumped out. Kupp had a bunch of catches. Several of them were on anticipation-based throws. That's a big part of Cooper Kupp's game because he's not a burner. That was very encouraging for me to see. 2 days in a row where Sam Darnold really looks dialed in. He's getting the ball out quickly, and there were a couple times where he got out of the pocket again if things weren't working and he didn't have a receiver open. So he's playing to what he is best at doing, and we're seeing him starting to really embrace what this offense is all about.
Well, and I think that's to be expected, Corbin. I mean, obviously, Sam Darnold has some experience in Klint Kubiak's offense, having been both of them being in San Francisco a couple of years ago. So there is going to be some familiarity there. And then, of course, as you alluded to, the time that he organized with his receivers to be able to develop some camaraderie over the offseason, I think that's certainly going to help. I think that also, just kind of stating the obvious here, the defense isn't quite playing, full speed at this point. They have been instructed not to compete for the ball, allow the receivers to get the ball. That's one of the things I want to kind of go back to just a moment on what I saw in yesterday's practice, where we saw Jackson Smith and Jigba, for example, make a couple of terrific catches where he snatched the football out of the air. At the same time, he wasn't necessarily open. And so that is still remains one of my biggest concerns is, do the Seahawks have enough playmakers, enough guys with that elite speed, the elite agility to be able to create enough separation to make it a little bit easier on Sam Darnold? Look, I've been evaluating quarterbacks for an awful long time, and one of the reasons why I do think that Sam Darnold is going to wind up actually being an upgrade, not necessarily statistically, but an upgrade in terms of wins, in terms of game-winning drives, things of that nature, an upgrade over Geno Smith, is because I really view quarterback as a position you basically can break down into 5 different segments of how you're evaluating quarterback. I call them the 5 A's: accuracy, anticipation, arm strength, athleticism, and attitude. I think attitude is the important one. I think Sam Darnold has that. He's already been demonstrating that, just what type of a leader that he is. The accuracy, I think that is something that Geno Smith is as good as any quarterback in the NFL. But at the same time, it's the anticipation. That's what you were just mentioning. It's one of the things that stood out on Sam Darnold's tape going back to his days at USC. One of the concerns I've had about Geno Smith going back to his college days, all the way back to West Virginia, and certainly during his time the last couple of seasons as the Seahawks starter. There's just too many times that I thought Geno Smith fail to throw the football before his wide receiver was open. And again, that is one of the areas in which I think that Sam Darnold is going to be an upgrade. So I'm encouraged by what we've seen from Sam Darnold and frankly, the rest of the Seattle quarterbacks. I think that Drew Lock and Jalen Monroe also had some moments in his first couple of days. But again, I do have some reservations about whether the Seahawks have enough juice at the wide receiver position to make the job a little bit easier on whoever is going to be quarterback, presumably, of course, Sam Darnold.
That's still the biggest question mark with this group, because I think from a depth perspective that the Seahawks have a lot of really good receivers on their roster. I think that there's a lot of NFL caliber receivers that are on this roster. But is there going to be enough speed? Is there going to be enough burst? And that's why I'm going to mention Tyrone Broden here very quickly. Tyrone Broden is a legitimate 4.3 guy at 6'5". He's got size. He's got elite speed. And he had a couple really nice grabs again today. Now, he's playing with the second and third string offenses, so we're not seeing him catch passes from Sam Darnold. But this is a guy that I continue to see those just pure traits, the pure athleticism and size. And he's been really sure-handed up to this point. When he's had balls thrown his direction, he's bringing them in. I look at the catch rate that he had. A lot of that had to do with the fact that the quarterback play had at Bowling Green and at Arkansas. He didn't have a lot of great opportunities to make catches when it was thrown to him. But I think he has that big catch radius, and I think that you're seeing a guy that maybe has better hands than we advertise. So him, Steven Sims had another good day. I feel like you have a lot of really solid receivers. The question is, though, is there enough burst? Is there enough speed? I real quick want to transition to tight end because we know the news with Noah Fant going into this week, getting cut a couple of days before training camp started. He's visited with the Bengals, trying to find his next spot in the NFL. And a lot of people wondered what that meant. And you and I had already speculated earlier in the week that, hey, Brady Russell, this is a chance for him to just be that number 3 tight end. And he still gives you the flexibility to play out of the backfield if you want to use him there. But Robbie Oots is the fullback. I think we can already say that. I feel strongly that he is going to be the fullback. But you have the flexibility with Brady Russell. He had a really nice diving grab on a seam route today. We know he can block. We know he plays great special teams. He can put his hand in the dirt. He can play out of the slot, back in the backfield in a pinch. There's a lot to like about him. And I just think that Brady Russell and Eric Saubert, those are two guys we're going to be talking about a lot because Elijah Arroyo and A.J. Barner are clearly the 1-2 punch for Seattle atop the depth chart. And Arroyo's presence made it easier to move on from Noah Fant because of his athleticism, his pass catching ability. But I think Brady Russell now is clearly going to be on this roster. And I think Eric Saubert, his knowledge of this offense and his blocking ability, and he can play special teams really well too. Those are all things working for him. So I would go as far as saying, well, they might not have Noah Fant on the roster anymore, but I can now see Robbie Oots, Brady Russell, and Eric Saubert all being on this football team in large part due to special teams talent that all three of those guys bring and just being physical, grinded out kind of players.
Well, and then obviously they would also be keeping A.J. Barner and Elijah Arroyo. And so, again, we're talking about 4 or 5 players here that feel like they have a real shot at making Seattle's opening day roster for a variety of reasons. And I think that, to me, is the biggest reason why Noah Fant is no longer a member of the Seattle Seahawks. He had a bloated contract. The production wasn't there. And I think that the Seahawks were legitimately excited about especially the young players that were on their roster. To me, it was no coincidence whatsoever that basically within, 24, 48 hours of Elijah Arroyo signing the dotted line, assuring the Seahawks that he was going to be there in training camp ready to rock immediately, that Noah Fant was essentially given the pink slip. So I don't think that there's any, huge conspiracy or anything like that. I think that the Seahawks are, again, excited about the young, cheap talent that's on the field for them at that tight end position. I think that the positional versatility that Elijah Arroyo specifically has, is an upgrade over Noah Fant, who has a similar size, speed, kind of a combination, just hasn't turned into production. The fact that the Seahawks trotted out A.J. Barner on the very first day in which they had players actually welcome and talking to the media. I mean, it was Sam Darnold, and Devin Witherspoon and A.J. Barner. I think that might catch some Seahawks fans as surprised that he was with Sam Darnold and Devin Witherspoon, arguably two of the most, incredibly important players on your roster. Look, everybody that watched A.J. Barner a year ago, I think from a Seattle perspective, is going to be a fan of his game. The 4 touchdowns that led the squad as far as tight end speaks for itself, and his blocking, his all-around game is a significant upgrade, again, over Noah Fant, who is a solid blocker, but he certainly was a difference maker, and Barner showed flashes of that even as a rookie, so you're excited about what he might be able to provide. So I do think that this tight end group deserves to be mentioned along with Seattle's wide receiver. I think that the whole pass catcher thing is going to be a real thing here. I don't think you're going to see any one group just dominate things so much. That's not only because of Seattle's talent, but because of the way Klint Kubiak calls offenses, the way Sam Darnold likes to throw the ball around. But again, I think that is the biggest reason why Noah Fant is no longer a member of the Seahawks, not because that there was some dust up behind the scenes or any of the other conspiracy theories that are now making their way all over throughout the internet.
When we come back, we've got some defensive takeaways to dive into coming out of the second day of training camp. We'll get to that up next here on our Thursday edition of Locked On Seahawks. This episode is presented by Yahoo Fantasy Football. Fantasy football is back. Fire up the group chat and get your draft board ready. Buckle up for a season filled with breakouts, busts, and all the overreactions we live for. It's all going down on Yahoo Fantasy. This year, Rob and I are playing on Yahoo Fantasy, and you should too, whether you're a first-timer or a veteran making your millionth league. I've used Yahoo Fantasy for years and love how smooth the draft day experience is. Our Locked On leagues been running through Yahoo for a while now. Our setup is easy, great mobile app. The smack talk just hits different in the message boards, especially when I'm rubbing my victories into Rob's face. To celebrate 28 years of fantasy greatness, Yahoo Fantasy is dropping 28 big new features over 28 days, giving you more ways to play, more ways to draft, and more ways to win. It all begins on August 4th. Stay tuned and get started by creating and joining a Yahoo Fantasy Football League at yahoofantasy.com/LockedOnNFL. That's yahoofantasy.com/LockedOnNFL. And let's make this fantasy season the best one yet. Welcome back to the Thursday edition of Locked On Seahawks. I'm Corbin Smith. He's Rob Rang. A special thanks to all the 12s who are tuning in. Thank you, as always, for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. The Seahawks having their second training camp practice at the VMAC today. Wasn't open to fans, though there was a few fans there. They had some select people that were there, but not open to the public. Nonetheless, plenty of energy at the VMAC. Let's talk about some defensive observations. You can obviously talk Sam Darnold all day with the way that he's playing right now, the way that the receivers look, but I want to start with a position that has been a hot topic basically since the draft. When Nick Emenwari was drafted in the second round, Seattle traded up to get him. We already knew the Seahawks had Julian Love, Kobe Bryant. They had just signed DeAnthony Bell. Ty Akata was coming back. A.J. Finley coming back. Jarek Reed II coming back. There's a lot of NFL caliber talent and maybe even a lot of starter caliber talent there for the Seahawks at that safety position. But you're obviously not going to have 13 safeties on your 53-man roster. So this is a position that we were expecting was going to be incredibly competitive, trying to figure out who's going to get those last couple spots. We expect Emenwari, Love, Bryant are already locks to make this team. I think DeAnthony Bell is a lock to make this football team, getting the first pick for the Seahawks in this training camp. And it was one of the few plays that we've seen that Sam Darnold held onto the ball just a little bit too long. He tried to squeeze the ball into JSN on a dig route, and DeAnthony Bell was not going to have any of that. He jumped the route and intercepted it. We saw him do something similar in minicamp. He had a pick on a deep ball as well. This guy's got way better ball skills than advertised. And again, he's big. He's 6'2", 210. He looks every bit of it. He's a big dude that can play in the box. He's got some of that strong safety capability, but I think he's a lot more fluid in coverage and clearly has ball skills. D'Anthony Bell to me is on this roster. So if you're going to keep 4 safeties, it feels like it's already set. But then you got Takata out there making plays today, getting his hands on the football a few times. Mike McDonald has raved about this kid. They love the work ethic and just the way that he plays the game. A.J. Finley's a really good special teams player. Jarek Reed II is a more athletic version of a few of these guys. There still feels like there's a lot of untapped potential there, and he's playing with the 3s in practice. So this group is just incredibly deep, and it feels like there's still some work to do as far as who's going to be that 5th safety, but I'd be really surprised if they don't have 5, because you got to play to the strengths of your football team, and this is clearly a position group that you have guys that can play up in the box. You have guys that can play slot corner. It feels like 5 players off this position is probably a given. The question is who's going to be that 5th guy.
Yeah, that is going to be fascinating to kind of just see the way the training camp and the preseason games unfold, to see who is going to be that 5th guy. I really think that, as you said, Mike McDonald has just kind of gushed about Takata. In the past, John Schneider has done the same kind of a thing when it came to Jarek Reed II. And, all the veteran players that you just talked about. To me, the unicorn, the unique one, of course, is Nicky Manwari. And I was fascinated to kind of watch where Seattle lined him up. And I thought that it made an awful lot of sense to move Manwari closer to the line of scrimmage. That, to me, is where his size and his physicality really is going to be a nice complement to the coverage ability that is Julian Love and Kobe Bryant behind. I think, obviously, the cornerback position as well, with the speed and playmaking ability that Seattle has there also. I think that in a very similar way to the way that Devin Witherspoon basically was kind of moved all over the field and allowed to kind of attack as a blitzer and run support, that's the role that I think Nicky Manwari is going to play for the Seahawks. So, we started off this conversation just a moment ago with the Yahoo Fantasy News. I don't know that focusing on defense is necessarily going to get our fantasy football listeners excited unless they can draft individual defensive players. Nicky Manwari, I think, is going to be a guy who's going to basically tally up a lot of different interesting numbers, whether it be tackles for loss, sacks, perhaps picks. And, of course, we know that he has a flair for the dramatic when he gets the ball in his hands, with a couple of scores on his own record back in South Carolina.
I want to shift the focus real quick to the inside linebacker position, because there's been so much talk about Ernest Jones, and rightfully so. He was fantastic last year. 94 tackles in 10 games, almost 100 tackles in part of a season with the team. He was fantastic. The coverage, the run defending, pass rushing when he got his opportunities, he was great in all those regards. But I think that we are not talking enough about his counterpart. I think Tyrese Knight is one of those players where he was just really just getting started last year, just kind of trying to brace himself while he was getting used to playing against NFL competition. And he did a good job in the second half. But I think that he was just trying to stay above water a lot of the time. I don't feel that now. I see a guy that really is starting to come into his own. And what excites me today, Dareke Young, he's a legitimate low 4.4 guy, and he had great agility testing scores. This guy is a fantastic athlete, and he was running a drag route, and Tyrese Knight was matched up against him in man coverage. That should go to Dareke Young. But this guy was hip to hip on him, running with him, and you could see the coach is just loving it. And he took away, it was Sam Darnold at quarterback. Darnold wanted to throw the football to Dareke Young, but it's like, well, wait a second. This 48 now is just flying underneath the ball. I can't throw it. And that just tells you the kind of athlete that he is, the instincts, and he just is flying all over the place. I don't think we're talking enough about number 48.
Well, that's the thing, is that I think it's an acknowledgement of Tyrese Knight's athletic ability and the instincts that allowed him to be as successful as he was a year ago, despite the fact that a lot of his college career, as we've talked about so many times, was actually as an edge player. So, again, I mean, I think it's a tip of the cap to Tyrese Knight. Again, it's my biggest concern is, does Seattle have the wide receivers that are going to be able to run away from defenders? If they can't run away against linebackers, then again, that is one of the reasons why I think that, as positive as I want to be about the Seahawks offense, if you don't get Sam Darnold to weapons, you're asking him to basically shoulder the entire load, then I do think that that's going to be an issue.
When we come back, we're going to dive into the edge conundrum that the Seahawks are dealing with. Uchenna Nwosu's injury, Kind of a rough update from Mike Macdonald yesterday. Is it time now to shift the focus on trying to find supplements for that group? We're going to be diving into that up next here on our Thursday edition of Locked On Seahawks. This episode is brought your way by Monarch Money. Ever wish managing your money felt easier? With Monarch Money, it can. Whether you're growing your savings or planning a big purchase, Monarch puts you in the driver's seat. It's like having your own personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place so you stop just managing your money and start building wealth. When I started using Monarch a few months ago, I realized just how much I was spending on pizza. That's not a big surprise. Now I budget smarter and save more for other expenses that pop up in my life. Instead of juggling multiple apps, you can use Monarch to check your finances, track spending, and even manage your long-term goals. Managing money with your partner is smoother than ever. You can now track shared and personal accounts, set goals together, and stay on the same page without adding more stress. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money and use the code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNFL for half off your first year. Welcome back to the Thursday edition of Locked On Seahawks. This is your host, Corbin Smith. Glad to be joined, as always, by my co-host in crime, Rob Rang. And a special thanks to all the 12s who are tuning in. Thank you, as always, for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. We greatly appreciate it. Day 2 of training camp in the books. One player that we've seen in the field, but he isn't practicing and doesn't sound like he's going to be practicing anytime soon, according to Mike Macdonald. Uchenna Nwosu wearing the number 7 now after agreeing to give up his number 10 to Cooper Kupp. He was out there with his jersey and a sweatshirt underneath. He was chilling at the position drills, a bystander on the sideline. Not encouraging update yesterday from Macdonald saying that he's really not close, hinting that he's going to be up to the season, and then saying that. That didn't necessarily jive with the idea that he's going to be playing in week 1, even though there's been a lot of talk that that's what the Seahawks still think is going to be happening. If Uchenna Nwosu is not going to be ready for week 1, which I think now is a very real possibility, Rob, look, I've been arguing with a healthy Uchenna Nwosu that you should be calling Mike Brown of the Cincinnati Bengals and just pestering him nonstop about Trey Hendrickson. Now I'm thinking, like, this is truly you need to get on the phone and start working things. And if you can't make that work, Jadeveon Clowney says he's talked to 5 teams. Maybe the Seahawks are one of those teams, but I'd be picking up the phone if I haven't already on that front, because I think that you are looking at a situation that if Nwosu's not ready for week 1, he's going to miss at least 4 games being on the PUP list per league rules. This team is going to be missing a lot if he's not out there. And there is a big gap from the other 3 rushers to the rest of the players in that position group, particularly in this scheme, whether it's trading for Hendrickson. I know a lot of fans are going to say, well, call about Micah Parsons. Well, that seems like that's extremely unlikely that Jerry Jones is going to be willing to do that. But I guess there's no hurt in calling Dallas about him. You're going to have to give up a lot more than you would for Trey Hendrickson, most likely. But my point is, this does feel like this is becoming a concern in the sense that Derek Hall and Boye Mafe and DeMarcus Lawrence, while all good players, if those are the only 3 that you can count on, those guys are going to get beat up pretty quickly if you don't have a 4th guy that you can truly lean on. And right now, it remains to be seen if they have that player on the roster.
Yeah, and that is, again, I've mentioned before, wide receiver and questionable speed and playmaking ability is my number 1 concern with this club. Close behind is the edge rusher spot. I would throw a defensive tackle in there as well. Which might make Christian Wilkins, who, of course, was just released here by the Las Vegas Raiders, a candidate for some out there. With Jonathan Hankins is, nursing a back injury, hasn't been on the field yet for the Seahawks. As concerned as I am for Seattle to add another big body inside, I have to agree with you, Corb. I think the edge rusher spot is a bigger concern at this point. Look, Boye Mafe to me is kind of that unicorn, like I was talking about before, Nicky Manure at the safety spot. I really think that Boye Mafe is poised to have a 10-plus sack season. I just love his twitch. I love his agility. Derek Hall, who of course had the 8 sacks a year ago and really played good football for the Seahawks, looking at him in person at camp, I thought he looked bigger, and that could be a good thing. I love his power, but his legs are so massive. I don't know that he's going to have that quick twitch that usually is the kind of stuff that results in the 8 to 10 to 12 kind of a sack kind of a guy. So again, I'm a little bit hesitant to suggest that I think that he is going to make that next step up. So it is critical that the Seahawks either get something from DeMarcus Lawrence, who of course is coming off of an injury himself, or they get Uchenna Nwosu back healthy earlier rather than later, or as you just talked about, possibly looking for somebody who is no longer, that is not currently on Seattle's roster. And so I feel very confident John Schneider is going to be keeping close tabs on any available edge rushers, including the aforementioned Trey Hendrickson, because it just sounds like he and the Cincinnati Bengals are getting further and further apart as the NFL training camps are opening up throughout the league.
Yeah, and listen, I know Mike Brown is stubborn in Cincinnati. I mean, he is the textbook definition of stubborn, and sometimes it works out for Cincinnati. A lot of times it doesn't. And we're seeing it with Shamar Stewart, their first-round pick as well. Like, he's not giving up ground there. So I don't know that Cincinnati is going to be willing to entertain a deal. At the same time, if we get another week or so here in a training camp and you still got Trey Hendrickson chilling at home and he's not willing to come in because, like, he doesn't want to be a distraction. He doesn't want to be there not practicing. He's not going to practice till he gets a new deal. If the Bengals, I mean, Browns made it sound like they're making progress there, but then you read through the tea leaves, and it's like, I don't know that this progress that you're talking about is here. It doesn't look to me like I'm almost feeling like it's Leslie Nielsen in Naked Gun right now. Just kind of like, no, nothing to see here. Everybody move on. Nothing to see here. That's what it feels like in Cincinnati. And if I'm John Schneider, I'm continuing to try to monitor that, and I'm finding out because if you can give up a second-round pick and you can get him, I'm pulling the trigger every single day of the week. And I'm doing it any hour of the day. Like, I'm signing off on that. I just think he is a fantastic player. And I think Mike McDonald would know how to get the max out of him because Mike McDonald has played against him. He knows what Trey Hendrickson's capable of doing against AFC North competition. I think he's tougher than a lot of people think he is. I think he's a better run defender than people think he is. So I really would love to see Seattle do that. And I've talked about Clowney. I think Clowney, if you're not wanting to trade something away, we know he can play in this scheme at a high level. 2 years ago, he did it in Baltimore. So there are options out there. That is why I am imploring John Schneider to go look that direction, because can you count on Uchenna Nwosu to stay healthy too? I hate saying that, but we're now going on 2+ years that he just hasn't been able to stay on the field. Like, at some point, you have to have a plan B ready to go. And right now, I don't see a plan B on the roster. Like, signing DeMarcus Lawrence to go with him was a great thing, but they need to add another proven veteran here.
I think I 100% agree with you. I think, again, that is going to be something that the Seahawks are going to be prioritizing, edge rushers and receivers throughout the rest of training camp. But of course, the Seahawks do have the salary cap flexibility. They've got some draft picks, and they've got an awful lot of talent, including at, like, let's say, the running back position, the safety position, where there's such great depth that Seattle does have some talent that they might be able to dangle in trade opportunities.
Yeah, those are things that you can do to sweeten the pot with a second-round pick for Trey Hendrickson. Or, I mean, if you want to give up a couple first-round picks for Micah Parsons, if the Cowboys are willing to do that, like, if the Cowboys opened up they picked up the phone, like, I'd be at least willing. I think he is one of the 5 or 6 best players in the NFL when he is healthy and playing his best. So, look, I don't see that happening, but Trey Hendrickson very much to me is something that the Seahawks could try to pursue, that maybe they could get the Bengals into a position where they start thinking about making a move there. Clowney's a possibility. Von Miller just got signed, a guy we talked about, so that's not an option. But there certainly are a few vets out there that would make me feel a little better about where things stand here without a healthy Uchenna Nwosu and not knowing when he is going to be back on the field. As always, you can follow me on X and Blue Sky at Corbin Smith NFL. You can follow Rob at Rob Rang. Make sure to subscribe to Locked On Seahawks on YouTube and wherever you listen to your podcast to make sure you don't miss a single episode. When we come back tomorrow, Blue Friday edition, another training camp practice will be in the books. I'll have my interview with Seahawks center Jalen Sundell as we kick off our training camp interview series and much more. Make sure that you're listening in and enjoy the rest of your Thursday. Go Hawks.